What's up, guys? So today I have some big updates on the whole Signalgate story. So if you aren't caught up on this yet, the Signalgate story was where they found that various high officials and those in the Defense Department were using Signal to communicate various war-based plans over Signal. Now, this latest update gets a bit more serious and a little more concerning, because they weren't just using Signal, something that many people use and trust to discuss various topics with friends and family. They were actually using a Signal clone, something called Telemessage, and we're going to be looking at this story today. And what they were using was a Signal clone, and what that means is when you have open source software like the Signal client, which is fully open source, you can actually recode it or rewrite it in another language, or you can just make another function for it by basically creating a clone of the Signal client to implement whatever features it is you want to add to it, or to make it more compatible. For instance, I covered a Signal clone for the Pine phone and Linux phones a couple years back, so you can check my videos on that if you're interested and you have a Linux phone. But today we're talking about Telemessage, which is the Signal clone that was being used by those in the current administration in the US's cabinet and defense officials. Now, this story came out. They actually added this journalist here into a group chat. It said by mistake. Now, very well could be, because this journalist only had their initials as their name on Signal. It is possible they mixed it up with someone, but later news has come out that they weren't using the official Signal client. They were using something called Telemessage. Now, what is Telemessage? As mentioned, it is a Signal clone. Now, it is not a US-based Signal clone. In fact, it was created originally in Israel, and then later on it was bought by a company called Smarsh. And so what it was is actually a Signal clone that was intended for use, or at least it was lobbied for use to government officials. And the reason for this is because if you're in the government, from what I've read, you need to have some kind of archive of the actual communications that are official government policy. So anytime, high cabinet officials or anyone in the administration needs to discuss various policies, they're going to need something that has archival capabilities. And that's so there are records of those communications, and that is for later use and posterity. And this happened to be a Signal clone created in Israel, which I found was interesting, but really not that surprising, because there are various partnerships that appear to be in place for everything from information sharing to various software programs. Like, for instance, Telemessage was actually funded by something called BIRD, which is the U.S.-Israel Binational Industrial Research and Development Foundation. So I pulled up the page for BIRD, and you can see that they work on a lot of cooperative activity to foster and support the joint U.S.-Israel interdependence, basically, for advanced technologies for homeland security and other interests that are shared, at least by those who make policy. And so it appears that they helped to fund this Signal clone. Now, it gets worse. At this point, it's not even something that was made in-house. It's not even something that was made in the U.S. Defense Department. It was made in another country. And not only that, but apparently it only took 15 minutes to hack. So we're going to be taking a peek at this story today. As you can see, it was known as TM Signal, which is Telemessage Signal. It's a Signal clone that is... It was created by a few different people, U.S.-Israeli firm in Telemessage known as, and they actually just halted their operations after this very serious breach that exposed all of the messages. So basically, people were able to break in to these messages within 15 minutes. Now, the attacker or the auditor, whatever you want to call them, they actually are still anonymous at this point in time. We have no idea exactly what happened here. It could be a number of things. It could be some kind of audit. It could be some security researcher that looked at the story, the original story, where they actually saw video and saw photography that showed they were using this TM Signal client. And that was released in the news weeks ago. And we found out they added this guy to their secret group chat, which I think is amazing, that people can just be added in. But what's interesting is it also sort of relates in a way to the Crypto Wars video I did the other day, where we talked about adding a third party and how dangerous that is to the security of end-to-end encryption, because of course it's no longer truly secure end-to-end encryption when you add a third party. But that's exactly what they did here, is added a third party that was able to archive those messages. And in fact, you can see an example here of Telemessage, and you can see how they even have all of these Department of Homeland Security addresses here. Of course, they have redacted most of this, but the attacker or the hacker, whatever you want to call them, they actually posted this and shared this with 404 Media, who broke the story. And there are critical flaws in this TM Signal client. And I find it interesting that all of this has happened so quickly. I mean, first you have the journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, I think. Jeffrey Goldberg added weeks ago, and then 15 minutes is all it took to break an app, something that was trusted by the highest in all of the cabinet positions. An application that was created under a joint U.S.-Israeli funding operation known as BIRD, the binational, foster development and all that stuff. Just so interesting how it just shows that you can't really trust adding a third party to any kind of secure chat, because obviously they were using Amazon's servers, and they were able to access those Amazon servers as well. Not only that, they even had hard-coded credentials in this app. I just don't understand how this app could have passed any of the security testing that you would think would be required to actually pull something like this off, to actually have the highest in the Defense Department using an application that was also created in another country, and yet it had hard-coded credentials. Mind-blowing to me. This is all mind-blowing, just because it seems that it was so easy. It only took them 15 minutes to get in to all of the secret messages. And it just goes to show that, backdoors, they just don't work. So obviously they didn't intend this as a backdoor. This was an application that was intended, according to their presentation, it was intended to help archive government communications. But having all these critical flaws really calls into question how much auditing was done, who approved this app. How did this happen? How did this all come together? It seems more and more we keep seeing these stories that just continue to blow my mind, that, the centralization of data with Doge, all of this is just unbelievable. With this kind of, if you're dealing with classified information, they usually have some kind of compartmentalization of that information. But instead, with things like Doge, we're seeing more of a centralized access with AI, is what it appears to be, at least. Not making a claim, but from what I've read, that's what I'm gathering. It seems like a lot of the things that are happening are more so centralizing access to that information. Now, of course, Doge isn't related to this story at all, but it is something I covered recently. So just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. It's really mind-blowing that it only took 15 to 20 minutes and how easy it was to get in. The data they were able to access included the message contents, the contact information of all the government officials, as you see down here, all these email addresses, the usernames and passwords for Telemessage's backend panel. And that likely is directly a result of these hard-coded credentials, which is where you'll have something like an API key or even plain text credentials embedded in the application. Now, the fact that someone like Micah Lee was able to go in and discover that it had these hard-coded credentials in it, it really calls into question the people that created this app. I mean, how secure really was it? If it only took 15 minutes to break into, it was storing its data on a cloud server, on Amazon's cloud server. And, it just goes to show you that the only thing you can really trust is end-to-end encryption without backdoors, without third-party access, without these archival things. And that's why if you're going to use Signal, stay away from clones. Unless you're on a Linux phone or something that doesn't have access to the official Signal client, stay away from clones. You just don't know what kind of vulnerabilities they may have. And in this case, they were able even to get the decrypted and stored plaintext messages, the contacts, and everything else. And all of that was accessible within 15 minutes. So wanted to share this story with you guys. Make sure to follow over on the blog, bmc.link/politictech. And also now you can actually watch and read over on I2P at http://righttoprivacy.i2p. And I'll be updating the Gidia Onion server coming up, so we're going to be increasing the storage space on that. I actually have a friend who's actually hosting it, so I'm going to go over there, and so there may be a little downtime at one point, just for a day, less than a day, but I'll be taking care of that soon. So make sure to follow, make sure to share the videos. I appreciate all you guys for following, and make sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this story. And how do you think this passed? Does anyone who maybe works for the government know what kind of measures someone would have to take to get something with hard-coded credentials to be used by the top of the current administration's cabinet and Defense Department? I just don't understand how this stuff happens, but maybe someone can enlighten me. I'll be back later with more on how to protect your security and privacy.